When I first got my 3D printer, I needed something to practice with. And back then, I would print a lot of fidget toys. I started giving them to my one friend at work. At a certain point, he decided these fidget toys were not enough, and he said he wanted a banana phone. Now, some of you younger viewers out there may not be familiar with the old banana phone joke, but in the landline days, phones used to be shaped sort of relatively like a banana. So it's a common joke to pick up a banana, pretend like you're talking on the phone. He tells me this a while into me having the printer, and I was starting to dabble in design a little bit, and I was able to come up with something. So this was the first iteration of the banana phone. It looks like a banana, it's shaped like a banana, and it has a little number pad on it. It did the job, but just a couple problems with it. The buttons don't push down, it's just printed statically. The concept is there, but we could probably do a little better. And in a weird twist of events, this thing turned out to be pretty dangerous. Like, this thing were left sitting around, like if it was on the floor or something, if it fell and it was just sitting on the floor, it would just become this huge hazard. What the hell? So I set out to make an even better banana phone, one with buttons. One idea that I was going to carry over to the new design was to have a separate rectangle for the button plate. I figured out that we could use a linear spring to make the buttons actually bounce back up when they were pressed. So I created a socket for it. The buttons I designed were hollow so that the spring could go pretty far inside for stability. And I added the rectangle to the banana. And then I started thinking, what would be even better? Maybe even make it more like a real banana phone, is if it wasn't so much that the keypad was attached to the phone, but the banana had the buttons integrated right into it. That way it's a little bit more seamless, a little bit more that the banana itself is the phone and doesn't have something just tacked onto it. I did some positional adjusting so that way as the banana curved, the sockets would be at different depths accordingly. So after a few tests to make sure everything lined up and nothing was going to be grinding too hard in the socket, including getting the right size and length of spring, which took a couple of adjustments to get, but I got it. I also added a couple buttons at the top for answering and ending phone calls, because what good is a banana phone if you can't manage a phone call with it? I printed a number of test sockets just to check the positioning, make sure everything was good. Once I had a final design nailed down, I started printing everything. I printed the banana itself, I printed the buttons, and with the buttons, I decided what other colors could we use instead of yellow to help them stand out. What do you notice about bananas? Usually, they'll be mostly yellow, and oftentimes they have brown and green spots on them because, of course, it can't be perfectly ripe. It's going to be mostly ripe with parts of it that aren't ripe yet and parts of it that are overripe and starting to go bad, because bananas are weird like that. I printed the answer and end call buttons differently. Those buttons are gray, and then the answer icon is green, obviously, and the end icon is red, obviously. Printing the buttons is a little bit tricky because they're small and they don't have a completely flat bottom. When you print something like that with so little contact surface with the print bed, it tends to have issues where it can come off the bed or it might just not stick to it right in the first place. So what you can do in that situation is turn on this feature called Brim, which basically puts a one layer tall surface around the object that you're printing. That way, by the time it gets to the actual object, there's more plastic there to hold it to the bed. The only caveat to doing that, of course, is you have to remove the brim later on after it's printed, which is no problem. They have a tool for that. This is called a deburring tool. This rotating blade on the top gets dragged across the plastic and it just shaves away the part you don't need. Now, given that we had a total of carry the 6, square root, 14 buttons, I had to deburr all 14 buttons. Now, given my below average level of intelligence, it did not occur to me that this thing is actually a blade. Yeah, believe it or not, it cuts because it's a blade. And it's a decently sharp blade too. I was holding the buttons really tight because they're small, so I was making sure I had full control over them. In the process of that, my thumb was being used as the stopper. And as you can imagine, yes, I eventually cut myself, drew some blood, but that's okay. I slapped a Band-Aid on it, and then it occurred to me that I own a thimble, so I threw that on. So with all the injuries out of the way and with all the buttons cleaned up, I was able to go back and fit them onto the banana. So what I ended up doing is I used a little bit of super glue and I put some on the bottom of the spring and set it down into the socket for each button. I put some more glue on the top of the spring and then I held down on the button until it was set. It only takes a minute. And I did that over and over for each of the buttons. And in the end, we got a brand new banana phone that will not send you to another dimension, and it's got movable buttons. This kind of doubles as its own fidget toy. You can be sitting at the desk, pushing the buttons around. With the way it's designed, the buttons have different distances of travel, just so that they would make sense with the curve of the banana itself. You know, if you want a little tiny little press, you push the 6. You want a longer press, you push the 5. If you want to really be mashing buttons down, you can hit answer and end call. And I gotta say, this is one of the cooler things I've designed. It's a little on the simpler side. It's not quite as complicated as some things I've done, but hey, it works, and I will say it's pretty appealing. Do hit that subscribe button so you can know about the next video. I really do appreciate it. And excuse me, yellow.